Yeah, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate the intro. So, segueing a little bit about me, my name is Joel Novak. I've been a physical therapist almost 20 years now. I've been certified strength and conditioning specialist through the NSCA. For a little longer than that, I did that while I was in graduate school. I've been involved in like outpatient orthopedic, sports medicine, physical therapy my whole career. I've been into blood flow restriction training since 2017, I believe. So I've taught and trained in a bunch of different states pre-COVID. I did a lot of traveling during then, and then a lot more. It's been a lot online and remote training here lately. I've had a couple publications in it, and it's just a space that I love. And you'll hear more about it as I talk about it. You might have to like say, well, that's enough. They've got it because I teach a day. Yeah, right. That's super fair actually. So I teach day-long courses in this, so I'm gonna try to just consolidate like the overarching concepts for it, so everybody can kind of get just like this is what it is, this is why it works, this is why it's safe, things like that. Those are some of the most important elements to it. My elevator pitch on it always is that BFR works because exercise works. I'm not into a lot of like kind of out there concepts. It's literally the human body and its physiology was engineered to work and operate based on like stress and recovery. And blood flow restriction training is simply tapping into that. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. I went to Belmont University in Nashville, Tennessee. I played baseball there. Then I came back to University of Indianapolis for graduate school. And then I have a senior in high school and a junior in high school this year at LaPel. And I will just be starting, I've been an adjunct faculty member at University of Indianapolis, and I'm moving into a full-time role with Quincy University in Illinois starting in 2 weeks. So, and I'll still be doing some clinical stuff as well, but.
Well, no, he's working remotely.
Yeah, I'll be doing some remote stuff, yeah. But
Yeah,
not,
girls like,
sorry,
"Don't
not,
you leave."
not through community anymore.
Oh
Well,
my gosh, are you
yeah,
kidding me?
yeah, surprise.
He's gonna
I am still PR in there a little bit, so we'll see what happens with that too. Ironing out those details, okay?
We have. How am I gonna get fixed?
You're fixed right now. You're good. You're so good. So just I'm going to do a quick history of like where it came from, kind of the mechanisms behind it, the safety behind it, and then a couple like case studies that I think are pretty interesting. And then we'll go through tips and tricks on how to use it and some pitfalls that I see with it sometimes and just application. And then at literally any point in time, if you have a question, just shoot. Like we'll move along as we need to. But like I said before, the BFR just taps into your natural systems of healing, stress, and recovery, right? And so it's the same concepts as exercise. You're just doing it in a limited state of blood flow. So sometimes the term blood flow restriction sounds very risky and unsafe, but it's just limited blood flow. It's not stopping blood flow. Okay, that's a very important distinction. The bands that Grace in Motion uses, they are incapable of restricting blood flow fully, like fully occluding. So that is a design part of this product that you cannot fully restrict the flow of blood into or out of a limb, which is why they use it. It's a very safe product to use. There are lots of products out there that are also good and safe, but this one is like kind of foolproof in that manner. But we'll go through tips and tricks on that. Just kind of where it started back in the 1960s in Japan. It started with what's called katsu training, which just means katsu means additional pressure. And long story short, the Dr. Sato, who sort of created this, he had a downhill skiing accident, he had a trimalleolar fracture, and he also injured his knee. So at the time, what they did, the treatment at the time was full leg casts. And then so he's just immobilized in a cast, and what they would do at the end of that 6 weeks often was they would remove the cast and they'd put on a new tighter cast because everyone would atrophy because you can't move the limb underneath it. Well, he decided to, while he was restricted, he would just strap a belt around his leg and do a bunch of isometric quad sets, like a judo belt is what he decided to use, I believe, if I'm telling that story accurately. But all of that to say, when the doctors took his cast off, he had no atrophy, they didn't recast him, and he decided he was onto something, and he sort of started down the invention pathway of creating blood flow restriction training. And he went through a lot of pitfalls. He made a ton of mistakes on just wrapping any old device around him. That is not what we're doing. That's not modern blood flow restriction training. But that is sort of the thought process with what to do. And again, the evidence behind that is we know that if you disuse atrophy in your limb, you can get, I'll look at the stats, it's 14 to 17% atrophy in the first 3 days of not moving a limb. And so just doing like quad sets by itself cannot reverse atrophy. So doing it with BFR to be able to do that was an impressive feat, basically. So long story short, this is how a lot of things develop. He was in the fitness space first before he got in the medical space. And so they started what they called occlusion training. So the early literature will refer to it as occlusion training and not blood flow restriction training. And ultimately it was borne out in the West because Japanese bodybuilders were getting a very good pump before their competitions because they were using BFR, and Westerners were seeing that and wanting to know what they were doing. So I would say it kind of started with like bro science as an original, this is what we're doing. And then again, it's evolved. It's very scientific now. There are literally thousands of publications in peer-reviewed journals on blood flow restriction training now. But 60s and 70s era was a little wild, wild west with the creation of BFR. And so now in like Europe and the Americas right now, we are doing things with straps and wraps and belts and blood pressure cuffs and surgical tourniquets and just all these different devices in the market. And now it's become a space where it's a niche product where lots of people are doing, come use our cuffs. We have an app and you can inflate and deflate and track your progress on an app, and a lot of evolution in the product space on BFR, which is wonderful, but it's all just the same thing conceptually. And I'll talk about why the research there isn't. It's like Crest and Colgate, you know, like they're gonna say that they've got but it's nothing other than marketing stuff. So it's just like BFR works. All the products that are out there for the most part are good and safe and work. We'll talk about this specifically later because this is what you'll be using, but generally speaking, it's good stuff. So safety, I just want to talk a little bit background on the safety. So again, I've been involved in this space for 8 years now, and people were a decade before that in the West, and then this has been going on since pre-2000. So this has been around a long time, but it's still new-ish to everybody. It's still becoming popularized. And I just like to say that this study, that I don't even know if this is up to date, but Katsu specifically is more of like a kiosk thing. Like you would go in over a lunch hour, 20, 30 minutes, do Katsu, BFR, get like some kind of workout in, and then you go about your work day. Or it's like a gym. Like it's not even like a medical. It is used medically as well, and it's used in rehab, but it's more commonplace. And so there have been over 20 million sessions in over 50 countries of Katsu alone. And the reason I'm using them as an example is they started this. They founded it. And when people are worried about the safety, I always highlight, listen, if people were having strokes and heart attacks and limb problems from this, we would have heard about this well before all the problems, before all this. I mean, 50 countries, 20 million in just that product space alone. So mechanisms. By restricting blood flow to working muscle. So in the world that you guys are going to be using it, there's some other research that we're not going to go down into, but you're working out, you're exercising while your limb is being restricted with blood flow restriction, which is going to increase the demand of oxygen, right? So anytime our muscles are working, we need more oxygen to get into the muscles so that they can keep working. But because you've got the cuff on, you're giving less oxygen. So less oxygen is available to use. So what that's going to happen is you're going to get tired faster. All right, so you're going to decrease the work that you need to do to reach fatigue. The biggest part of that, the biggest success with that is when we're training here, ultimately we're trying to get to some level of fatigue. When you're exercising, you want to have some kind of exertional fatigue so that you can train your body to then overcome that stimulus. So with BFR, you're doing light work usually, and you're going to get tired faster. That's the general concept. So less oxygen's available, but your body's asking for more oxygen. Okay, that's kind of the mechanism behind it. And so when we repeatedly fatigue motor units, so we're going to talk a little bit specifically here about like strength training. So let's just talk about BFR in like strength or hypertrophy space, like size. When you're repeatedly recruiting motor units, they're going to get tired. Additional motor units are going to need to be used to complete the work that you're doing. So you're going to start recruiting more motor units, which is what you need to grow muscle. All right. So what we're going to do with BFR is you're going to place a band around your upper arm or your upper thigh. So I've been in social media spaces and trying to like help people out, and sometimes they didn't ask for help, so sometimes I just need to be quiet. But I always tell people, like, you'll see somebody place a cuff right here and they'll be doing like calf raises, or they'll put it down here and they're just doing like forearm work. And my conversation is always that it's all the same plumbing. Like if you restrict the garden hose by the spigot or all the way down at the end, all that matters is the end. All right. And so the reason that you don't want to put it lower is your nerves and blood vessels are more superficial in these spaces. Okay, so your risk of compressing neurovascular structures is greater, where I would say like there's more meat to go through when you're doing circumferential compression with a band up higher, which is really the nuts and bolts of why that it's safe to do up high and why you place it up high. So there's no good research anywhere that I've ever seen that talks about placing it lower down your limbs, okay? And then nowhere on your trunk, for the record, okay? No experimental, like, really get swole. Yeah, it's fine, just, yeah, real thick neck, guys. So locally, the muscles that are being restricted, so like if I have a band here, locally, this is everything distal to the band is what's being directly restricted. So I'm getting less blood flow to here, so I'm reducing oxygen to here, which is gonna increase like my metabolites, right? So like my waste products are gonna increase as I'm a little more south of the restriction. And then these cells lower here are going to become more responsive to stresses because they're directly being impacted. Okay, the motor units here are directly being impacted. All right, well, systemically, so what your body is experiencing, all right, my brain is telling me I'm getting very tired here. Because I have less blood flow into this, my body's going to try to create more blood flow. It will do that by increasing my heart rate. It will increase ventilation, like I'm gonna breathe a little harder. I might perspire a little more. Like these are all natural systems that our body uses to respond to stress and exercise and exertion. So like systemically, we are getting that. Like our bodies are getting that effect. So we're gonna start to release circulating hormones, because that's again, our body is systemically going to respond to that growth hormone, something called vascular endothelial growth factor, which is important because that is a hormone that helps to stimulate like vessel growth. So if you want to have like larger muscles, for example, that are more efficient muscles, the vasculature to those muscles needs to be increased, or at least larger size or more branches, right? And so like that's just the mechanisms of how that's going to work. But again, that's not different than exercise. It's just we're using BFR to create that stimulus, okay? All right. The biggest thing, I've said this before, we are not occluding limb flow. So if a client or patient asks, like they will have blood flow into and out of their limb, all right? The easiest way to do that, and we'll do a breakout here in a little bit, is do they have a pulse? So you can literally put the band on and you can check a pulse. Same thing in your legs, you've got different places for pulses in your limb if you wanna check a pulse, but if they have a pulse, you can't be shutting off the flow of blood into the limb. So that's just an important thing to talk to the patients about if they're worried about this being on there. Same thing, like you can also inflate, deflate, and we can kind of go back and forth with what that feels like for a patient. But because you are sometimes a little bit more pooling some blood, you might have some color changes. Okay, so you might have some purples and reds that become more prominent that you see when you use BFR. It happens less in the lower leg, especially a healthy lower leg, but I've had I'm a physical therapist, so I have a lot of patients and they have a surgically injured limb and repaired limb, and so their vasculature is also a little compromised sometimes, so they'll see discoloration a little more prominently than maybe a traditional client would. But you definitely see in the arms a little bit more. So I would say like if it's not white, you still have blood flow again, right? And so there's a rebound effect. You can see like a capillary refill. So anyway, lots of ways to check safety mechanisms for blood flow restriction training, including pulse and all that. But again, the idea is that you start with easy exercise, those motor units tire, your body, so the waste products are available too, and you're not flushing those waste products like you do traditionally too. So the waste products are still there, which again makes it a little more muscle burn, a little more fatigue, and it just makes things more tired more quickly. All right, and then the idea there is those motor units, type 1 fibers, type 2 fibers, the whole concept is, again, if you're looking for muscle growth, that happens with type 2 fibers, and we need to stimulate those for muscle growth. Lots of people new to exercise, you're just trying to get them to get some work, that they feel safe and they feel like they're making some progress. And we'll talk about how to use BFR to help with that some, but ultimately the more stress and more stimulus that you're trying to get with BFR, that is a concept that we're trying to get to as well. Okay, so, yeah, we just talked about that. We won't go anymore. That's gonna get too professory here in a minute. So, motor unit recruitment, I do want to talk about this. I don't know, can you guys actually see this okay if I kind of spin that? Is that okay to see? Okay, it doesn't care that you can read it, but the idea here is things that are explosive, maximal sprints, clean and jerks, power cleans, snatches, explosive medicine ball throws. They're so fast and explosive moves, they recruit the most motor units. Okay, so that would be like, how do you get the most motor units versus isolated work? Arm curls, triceps extensions, a seated row, an incline press, a military row. So the idea with BFR here is when you're doing isolated work with that, you're not recruiting maximal motor units because it's a controlled move. Well, with BFR, the research would support that you're going to be able to contract and recruit more motor units with these isolated movements. So the concept is you're doing the same work. So I'll talk about the BFR research in a minute, but the research for BFR consistently supports that with matched loads. So if you're doing 4 sets of 20 arm curls with 10 pounds, and you're doing 4 sets of arm curls with the same amount of weight, but your blood flow is being restricted, consistently you are getting stronger, you're recruiting more motor units, and you're going to grow your muscles. Your cross-sectional area will show growth more than his because that's that matched workload. So if you're going to do that, BFR just comes out on top all the time. It is also comparable to heavy loads. So that'd be like he's going to do 3 sets, no, he'll do 5 sets of 8 at 40 pounds. So he's doing significantly heavier load, and you're going to end up coming out with comparable results, and both of you are well ahead of the person without their blood flow being restricted. So he's in a free flow normal state. He's in a free flow normal state, but with heavy load. You're still with the light load, but with your blood flow being restricted, and you're getting similar results to the heavy load. That's what the research will support, and I'll show you some of those studies because they're really neat studies. And it's consistent. That is a regular, consistent finding with BFR. They've done it in so many different sample sizes of patient populations, so many different lifting moves like isolated moves. But the conversation here is you don't grow muscles with heavy explosive work unless there's a lot of reps and a lot of load because it's too fast, like a max sprint. Sprinters are fast, powerful athletes. The act of sprinting itself isn't necessarily a growth stimulus. They work on that in a different way, and then they use that growth and that size to be explosive. All right, so there's just different arenas for BFR and how we can apply it, but the concept of recruiting motor units is something I wanted to spend some time with because when you're training your clients and your patients, they're going to come to you with different ability levels and different goals. And you have somebody I have injured population a lot of times that they're not allowed to because of their surgery do more than this. And so how do I grow muscle with this being all they're allowed to do for a period of time? And that's very complicated. So a lot of times it is just try to lose as little muscle as possible or try to just get motion or try to get other things in a rehab space. And with BFR, I can not only mitigate atrophy, I can show some little growth early with this. And that's going to be some of your lower level clients too. Like they're not going to be able to tolerate or handle a lot. And so if you can create a stimulus environment where they can recruit more motor units, doing the work that you would have them do that's light anyway, that's a home run. That's a good early victory for why BFR could work in the lower level client population. And then the higher level client population we can keep talking about, but there's a lot of opportunity there for them too. Okay, that is good there. So this sentence, but so like if your muscles and tendons and joints and everything are being stressed at light loads, the research is going to say around 30% of what your 1 repetition max would be. All right, but you're achieving the benefit like you're training at more than double those forces. It's easy to see how that's going to be a highly effective strategy, and that's why BFR has become more and more prevalent, and it will continue to be here. I have said it since I've been training. I used to say when I started, this will be everywhere in 10 years, and now that I'm 8 years down the road, I'm like, it'll be here in 5 years total. Like, I mean, it's just going to be everywhere, and it is growing, but it's just still, everybody's a little slow to adopt stuff, and again, it's a product. Anytime you add something to the mix, it's now a barrier, right? Like, it's not just something somebody can get to, so that's a barrier to entry, but it's an opportunity as well, so. Okay, yeah, we already talked about the central, like, your central fatigue, your systemic effects, like your autonomic nervous system, you know, that fight or flight, like that is gonna, you'll notice it. Like if you put BFR on and you start doing step ups and you're trying to talk to somebody, you're gonna be like, am I out of shape? I'm getting a little more tired. I'm like, well, I don't know if you might be out of shape, but like ultimately you're definitely gonna be getting more tired because it's an easier thing for you typically, but now it's harder. So that would be the idea there. Okay, we talked about all that. So just oversimplifying. Exercise in BFR, you get fatigue. Your nervous system communicates those feelings of fatigue. Systemically, you get anabolic repair signaling molecules that are trying to respond. They're going to circulate through your system. Locally, your muscles are going to work to recruit additional motor units until they're tired. And all of the exercise tissue are going to get the benefit of local and systemic work, right? So if your body is working, even if you're locally fatigued, your body will benefit from exercise. You're going to get the systemic benefits of exercise. I'm not making claims that you restrict your blood flow in your bicep and you're going to grow your quad on your opposite side. I'm not saying that. I am saying your body will respond positively to exertion and work. And we've all seen that. We know exercise works. If exercise was a pill, everybody would take it, right? Like, it's work. It's hard to do. It's hard to get there, but the benefits are there. And BFR is just a way to tap into that. So, safety. All right, big part about safety. You're going to get this question a lot when people are nervous about this, and I always say that most commonly the research would support that the side effects that you could experience with BFR are no different than what you might get with traditional exercise. Period. However, because you're restricting blood flow, there are some caveats. There's some concerns or some considerations that we have to have, but generally, if it's safe to exercise, it's safe to use BFR, generally. Katsu, let's go back to Katsu. In 2006, so this was the first national survey. This was a Japanese nationwide survey, and they literally put out surveys to over 100 clinics with over 12,600 people responding to this. So just to point that out, this is people that responded. So if you've ever done Katsu one time, you responded to the survey. If you've done Katsu 100 times, you still get one response. So it's a minimum of 12,600 times that people have done Katsu. And they did various types of exercise: physical exercise, walking, cycling, weight training, anywhere from 5 minutes to 30 minutes, 1 to 3 times a week, like 54% male to female, under 20 years old, over 80 years old, across the lifespan. The incidence of a blood clot was 0.055%, pulmonary embolism, so like a clot that goes into the lungs, 0.008%, and something called rhabdomyolysis was also 0.008%. And just to point out that those stats that they found, we want 0% in everything, but like those are also equivalent to just the general population walking around. So that isn't an increased risk, is the point. 10 years later, they redid this study, okay? So 10 years later, they did this study, and it was 200 clinics, over 30,000 sessions, and they'd expanded the use of BFR. So at that point in time, they've done health promotion, diet, muscle strength, hypertrophy, sports performance rehab, orthopedic injury, anti-aging was what they'll call it over there, because it's funny that they use BFR as an anti-aging tool. Like they promote it that way, but to me it's a little like, well, it's exercise. Like exercise is anti-aging, you know, and they're using BFR to get there, but it's like, yeah, sure. I mean, that gets people in the door, great, but it's an interesting. And they found, and the quote from this is, there were no side effects: no pulmonary embolism, no nerve compression paralysis, no rhabdomyolysis, no venous thrombus, no pulmonary infarctions. The most common side effects were drowsiness, numbness, bruising, itching, nausea. Itching's a funny one. So like Landon, that would be one of his symptoms that he would get. I'd put BFR on his legs and he'd be exercising, and then you just see him kind of doing this with his legs. Sometimes like, you okay? He's like, yeah, it just itches a little. I was like, that's a side effect. But it's a little bit like, I don't know if anybody's had this experience, but an increase like in blood flow, like if you think about like the capillaries and everything that goes around you and your like leg hair and everything just kind of superficial there, like it's just sort of a body response to that. But so again, my point of even saying that as a side effect is like, none of that is serious. None of that is risky. It's just, yeah, I noticed that. Okay. Yeah, sure. That's okay. It is drowsiness, nausea, itching, and then the numbness and the bruising are the two that are the ones that people get a little more nervous about. The numbness, all of the evidence that's out there, they call it transient numbness. And my response to that is always, has anybody crossed their leg and had their foot fall asleep? And it's like, of course. Yeah, you're compressing a nerve when you do that. If you have a band circumferentially restricting your limb, there's a risk for you to compress a nerve. Definitely true. If that were to happen to one of your clients and like, oh, my hand's tingly or my foot's all tingly, you would just deflate the band, unstrap it. You could literally adjust it 2 inches reinflate, and they're like, yep, it's good. Just like you've crossed your legs at fall asleep, you uncross it, recross them, it's like, yeah, it's fine again. You're just not trapping a nerve. That's the concept, okay? But you would never continue down that pathway with pinching a nerve with exercise, just like you wouldn't continue down that pathway like leaving your legs crossed. So point being, that's a minor one, but it is a thing, and nerves are a concern for a lot of people, as they should be.
Do you remember that picture?
I do remember that picture. So this is a,
This is Luke, and this is 2 days later. His whole arm was bruised. Whoa.
so Luke, and do you remember when I was talking about, do you remember when I said BFR and like light loads? I think Luke was going a little more than light.
That was his coach.
Sets of 10.
Sets of 10.
For maybe 80 minutes.
80 minutes.
So he just, it's so the bruising as a risk factor, it's like, yeah, you definitely compromised your vasculature to where like you had a lot of like capillary breaking, and that's like the bruising that you get. And it's like, yeah, you're gonna need a break from that for a little bit.
So the next time, we just decrease the pressure by like 20 mg, is that what it is?
Yeah, millimeters of mercury, yep.
And he had no issues. The pressure was a little tight for him, especially because at that age, you get a big pump about 30 to 40 minutes, so that's just getting tighter and tighter as you get more pumped up. So then he never had another problem, but yeah.
And a lot of the research that's out there, and like this company specifically would say, don't do it for more than 20 minutes at a time. Like that would be their recommendation. Now, the guy that did the training, so like to Ryan's defense here, the guy that created this product was the head of the U.S. Ski and Snowboarding Association and worked with a lot of athletes for his profession. And he would say, like, listen, that is what's been studied, that's what's been researched, that's what we have to default to our conversation. He was like, we have cross-country skiers that are wearing these while they're cross-country skiing. If you've ever been cross-country skiing, you're out there forever doing that. He's like, so yeah, we definitely exceed that. He said, but I'm also, they're trained and we're working through that, but like as far as the evidence, as far as being precautionary, if again, anybody new to exertion and exercise, yeah, you're not going for 80 minutes restricted. You're trying to like make sure that they can tolerate that and their system handles that, their vasculature handles that, their nervous system handles that. But that's the idea. But early on, you're lower with that, and then you can build from there.
Is it common then to be extremely sore after this, since you're restricting the anabolic repair and the lactic acid release?
So like, yes. It's also common if you were to work to a level of fatigue that's near, I don't want to say failure, it doesn't have to be near failure, but like, yeah, like if in a second here we do some of the breakouts, like if I were to say, if you're typically used to being able to curl, I'll use curls because it's just an easy isolated move. If you were to say like, listen, I can do 35 pounds and I'll do 4 sets of 10 at that, and that's a typical workout that I would do for my biceps. I would say, okay, well then you're gonna do 10 pounds and we'll do 4 sets of like 15, maybe 18, something like that. And so that's gonna be lighter for you to do, definitely, but because you're doing a few more and it's lighter, you're still gonna get tired, and that level of fatigue and pump might create some soreness because of signaling, because of metabolite accumulation, but mostly because of mechanical tension. So the mechanical tension of the load and the force that you're experiencing, your body will recognize, and you can create some soreness after that. And I will say that like we're all okay with a layer of soreness that happens, but there's the old school, you have to break muscle down before you build it back up, is not true. It's been disproven. So we don't have to do that. You don't have to get to failure of a muscle. As a matter of fact, if you get to that and you're so sore afterwards, then it takes enough time to repair that you can't train again at the levels you would want to train. So the new research is saying avoid that. I would make an argument that early you're probably going to experience that, and that's acceptable because your body's just trying to get used to that, and that's all okay. But the more trained you are, the less sore you should be with that. Yeah. Contraindications, meaning do not do, like you should not be doing blood flow restriction training with this per the research, is if you're on medications that increase clot risk, or you have a medical condition that increases clotting risk. So that's something to kind of try to figure out a little bit. But patients with active cancer or cancer treatments, they're saying don't do this with as well. One of the reasons for that is the vascular endothelial growth factor that I was talking about, the vessel growth. I mean, tumors also want that growth, and so they haven't really studied that well to know if they can be differentiated. But like we would all want patients to exercise with cancer. And so I think it's just an understudied population. A lot, and pregnancy is a contraindication. Same thing, nobody studies pregnant ladies ever on anything since the beginning of time, and it's super frustrating because there's so many things they could do but everybody has to sign off on it, and you're not gonna get a review board to approve it. And anyway, that's a digression. With a blood clot, untreated hypertension, recent skin and vascular grafts, so if you've had grafting, skin vascular grafts, sickle cell, indwelling catheters, access ports, open wounds, active lymphedema, recent history, but probably even maybe prior history of a stroke is in there. A lot of these things are people you wouldn't be exercising with anyway. Now, stroke is a different one. If you had an old stroke, and now, like, I don't love that. I've had people with that. DVT, so blood clots in the limbs. I've definitely treated patients with BFR that had a blood clot 20 years ago in their leg, absolutely. But the research, that's because I feel comfortable in doing that, but the research is like, your body has thrown clots before, so are we worried about that happening for you? So we can kind of unpack that a little bit later.
Any correlation with calcium scores and BFR?
Not that I've seen. Yeah, not that I've seen. There's a few, there's people that have like a clotting disorder, like it's called factor V Leiden. It's just a clotting disorder that you can have, and so like because of that, you wouldn't restrict blood flow into and out of a limb with that. Sickle cell is one of those things where how the oxygen molecule is carried on the red blood cell, because the red blood cell is sickled. That's a tough with exertion too, but again, unlikely that you're going to be experiencing that with the population.
I'm sorry, I have a lot of questions.
No, it's okay.
But it's because I work with people in these states.
Sure.
You said untreated hypertension.
Exactly. So like, for example, if a patient comes into you and they're going to be in your class and their BP is 150 over 108, they shouldn't be taking your class. They also shouldn't be using BFR.
Okay.
That's sort of what I mean. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, so now then we go to precautions. So like so here's a perfect example. If you have varicose veins and you have peripheral neuropathy and you have high blood pressure and you have limited experience with exercise and you're diabetic and you're overweight by a lot, you're morbidly obese. Well, you've just checked like 7 or 8 boxes. I may not start with BFR with you until I see how you respond to other levels of exertion, right? Because there's too many precautions, but none of those by themselves are contraindications. So they're just things we need to be, I can point you to some research that a guy named Nick Rolnick has done, that he's put together basically like a risk stratification paper. And he's basically like, this is worth this many points, this is worth this many points. And so of these things, if you have a certain number of points, you probably aren't a candidate for BFR. But even that is still somewhat hypothetical. Like, he's not studied this system. It's just put together to try to help people understand their risk and minimize risk. And it's all about risk mitigation. But just in and of itself, the nature of what BFR is and how it works, it's not inherently risky, any more than exertion and exercise is. Again, to some small extent. Okay. What time we got here? Okay, we're doing okay, right? Skip that. Real quick, I'll nerd out for a second here. Hemodynamics is just like what happens with your blood flow. And so study done that was a systematic review, so it was a really powerful study, and it basically said your heart rate, your systolic blood pressure, your diastolic blood pressure, your rate pressure product, your mean blood pressure, all of that were within the normal range using BFR. Like, they, across all the studies that have been done, a clinical physiology, functional imaging research article came out, and there's been some that have supported it since then. And it's basically saying all of the things that happen that we would measure blood flow with, and the way blood is circulating into and out of our system with BFR is safe during and safe after. We did that. Okay. I'll go through some studies, some case studies, because I think they're exciting, and then we can move on, we can ask more questions. But the very first study that came west, it was a 2000 article, so literally in year 2000 in the Journal of Applied Physiology, and they did 24 women, ages 47 to 76. Why I think that's a relevant population to treat is that is a very, very common population that is trying to get healthy, okay? Very common. And what they did was twice a week for 16 weeks, okay? So 2 times a week for 16 weeks, they did seated dumbbell curls. They did 2-second concentric, 2-second eccentric, 3 sets of 18, 1 minute rest in between. Okay, that was what they did. They did a low intensity group, which was 50% of the 1 rep max. They did another low intensity group with occlusion, so they did 50% of the 1 rep max with BFR. Then they did a high intensity group with 80% of the 1 rep max. And then they did an untrained group that just did nothing. Okay, so they had 4 groups. Low intensity with BFR, high intensity, doing nothing. All right?
So the high intensity was without BFR?
Correct. And basically what happened was the untrained group got weaker. The low intensity group, they were doing the exact same work, they just didn't have the BFR on, they stayed the same. And the low intensity group with BFR and the high intensity group had identical progress with their elbow flexion, which was what they were doing. So after that, basically it was like, this was like doing high intensity training with less weight, like identical results. I'm gonna spin this around because this is, can you see these 2 graphs? These are 2 different studies. One is a 2-week study, one is a 3-week study. All right, and what they did, so this was a, when was this? Can't see right now. 2006, 2005, so those old studies, Katsu studies, and basically they walked. So you're not gonna get bigger muscles with walking, just flat walking for not very long. So walking, walking, walking with BFR, walking with BFR. All right, so that was the results of the study. Now, I don't know if I have it on here. I do have it on here. Okay, so here was the 2-week study. Twice a day they would do this. All right, so they'd come in the morning, come in the afternoon, and they would walk 6 days a week for 3 weeks. Okay, so it was a 3-week study. I was wrong. 3-week study. They did 5 sets of 2 minutes with 1 minute rest between. All right, so they'd walk for 2 minutes, take a break for a minute. Walk for 2 minutes, take a break for a minute. Walk. So they're walking for 10 total minutes, resting for 5 total minutes. They're there for 15 minutes twice a day. So it's a 30-minute walking day for them. They had their blood flow restricted during that, and they, from the control group to the BFR group, the Katsu group, they increased their 1 rep max leg press. They got a bigger cross-sectional area with their thigh, bone markers, so they had some bone growth, some actual like bone mineral improvements, and their insulin-like growth factor, so hormonal release was greater with this when they did like a blood sampling from them later. Yeah, go ahead.
Would that be both legs restricted?
So they did have both legs, yeah, they had both legs restricted with this one, yes. And ultimately, like the bottom line that I keep talking about to people is it's just like doing a light lift, just like the study before it. You don't lose, but you can't gain because it's not hard enough. So there's a maintenance level. I tell this to all my patients, like, it's your body, you need to maintain it just like you maintain your car, your home, whatever that is. And so maintenance work, go on walks, do light muscle training, like do it, it's awesome. Just, you're not gonna make progress doing that. You may not regress, but you're not gonna progress with that. So walking with BFR, you can actually grow muscle, increase some like bone mineral markers, some insulin growth factors, and then like actually get stronger. So they didn't even do leg press. Like they got a stronger leg press and didn't do leg press. That's, I think, really cool too, right? This is another graph showing control groups and BFR groups. Why I like this as well is this is cross-sectional area and strength. So this is now bench press. So bench press, if you think about it, like what muscles are working in a bench press primarily, right? So you could argue chest, you can argue triceps, you can argue front of the shoulders. There's a lot happening there, but I'm only restricting blood flow to my arm. I'm not restricting it to my chest or my lats at all, okay? So my triceps got, not mine, in the study, the triceps got bigger in the working group, but not in the control group. The control group didn't do the, wait, was this one? I might misquote this study. I can't remember if they did the same matched work. I think they did. They did matched work. One had blood flow restricted, one did not. That was the control group. So again, we talked about matched work and having your blood flow restricted. Triceps got bigger, pec got bigger, not being restricted. Okay, so you're gonna get that proximal growth from your pec. We'll talk about in a second. And then there's strength, so bench press got stronger. So why would a pec grow when it doesn't have its blood flow being restricted? All right, that's a good question to ask a lot. It's the same with gluteals, right? So if you have your thigh restricted, how would my gluteals grow in size because they're not being directly restricted. And if you go back to what I said earlier in the study, early in the presentation today, all muscles that are working are going to try to help complete the move. So let's use bench press again. Anybody that's bench pressed before, when it is light and you get tired and your triceps are just screaming at you because it can't keep doing the work, but the move is light enough that you can keep working, what muscles are going to be recruited? Other musculature is going to get recruited to help do the move because you're capable of doing the move. When the weight's too heavy, you're done with the move. When the weight's light, you can keep doing the work and other motor units are going to help kick in to finish that recruitment. Therefore, your pec is going to get that stimulus as well because it's working really hard to try to do the move. Same thing with anything else. High school population. This was a high school strength coach and I like to tell people it was in the second semester of the class because anybody that's new to adolescent lifters, they want it, and I'm not trying to say this harshly, you should not get credit for helping adolescents get stronger when they are surging with hormones and they're just going to get stronger just from walking into the weight room almost, right? Like, so don't overinflate yourself in that regard. That said, this strength coach on purpose took the second semester students so that they had a whole semester of novice lifting to make sure that they understood that they got that new growth stimulus out of the way. They understand how to move their bodies. And all this guy did, he did the same training with every student except for back squats were different, okay? And he had a population do, what they did was they did 3 sets of 10 at 65, 70, 75% of their 1 rep max. So every set, they did a little more, a higher percentage of their 1 rep max, 65, 70, 75. Then they did that is a normal group would do that. Okay, so just this is what you're doing. The next group would do 3 by 3. I'm misquoting that. That would be the heavier load group did. I take it like the heavier load group did 3 sets of 10 at 65, 70, 75. Then they finished with 3 sets of 3 at 80, 85, 90. That's a very good program. Like that's a good program. That's hard. That would be tough. That's a good finisher move. 3 sets of 10 at reasonable weight, and then 3 sets of 3 going heavy. All right, it's good strength coaching. I think that's good programming. And he had them rest 3 to 5 minutes between their sets to really recover so they could really go hard. Then they had another group that did 30% of their 1 rep max, but it was up to 30. So they did 1 set of 30, then 1 set of 30 at 20% of their 1 rep max, and then they did 3 sets of 15 at 20, 25, 30% of their 1 rep max. All right, and they only had 30 seconds of recovery. So their group had 3 to 5 seconds of recovery. They had 30 seconds of recovery. The rest of the strength training program was the same. What they found was the population that did the same, so they had another group do that same low load work. So like again, if I were to say, do my quick math here, if you had 100 pounds, 200 pounds on your back, all right, and you did 25% of that, that's only 50 pounds on your back, right? Is that the right math? I think that's the right math, yeah. So you never had more than 50 pounds on your back when you're squatting if you're doing 25% of a 200-pound squat is your max. So you're only at 50 pounds throughout this whole 12 sessions, 6 weeks, 2 times a week. That was all that was on your back if you had a 200-pound max squat. And they did students that did that and they did not get any stronger. They just maintained. The BFR group that did the exact same thing got a little stronger. Their 1 rep max in their squat was stronger, was heavier than the heavy load group that was well programmed, I think. So the heavy group actually underperformed the BFR group. And so like I can't imagine never having more than 50 pounds on my back and then putting 215 on my back when I'd only ever been able to do 200 before as a kind of a wild growth. No claim that that's always going to be the case. I'm just saying that was a high school population that got stronger with their back squats with never putting much weight on their back, which is pretty cool. The last one I'll show you, and then we can kind of break out on the study because I like this one too. This is 50 women, 48 women, ages 50 to 65 with known knee arthritis. Okay, they did a 12-week program twice a week. They were either in a low intensity group where they only ever did 30% of the 1 rep max, low intensity group where they did 30% of the 1 rep max with BFR, and then they did a high intensity group at 80%. And what they did was they structured it at week 1. It was 4 sets of 10 at 50% of their 1 rep max for the heavy group, week 1. And this is just leg press. Like they just did leg press. The low load group did 4 sets of 15 at 20% of their 1 rep max, either with or without BFR. Weeks 2 through 5, it was 4 sets of 10 at 80% for the heavy group, 4 sets of 15 at 30% for the low load of the BFR group. Weeks 6 to 12 was 5 sets of 10 at 80% and 5 sets of 15 at 30%. Okay, so that's how they structured the program to grow as they went. And what they found was the BFR group and the high intensity group had leg press gains. So 26% gain in the BFR group, 33% gains in the high intensity group in the leg press strength. The knee extension 1 rep max was 23% BFR, 22% high intensity group. The cross-sectional area of the quad, so the growth, the hypertrophy of the quad was 7% for BFR, 8% for the high intensity group. The time to sit to stand, so it's a functional measure, was a 7% improvement in BFR and a 14% in the high intensity group. And none of the low intensity group without BFR, they didn't make a gain in any category. So again, they got no better in any of those things. And then they did what's called the WOMAC pain index, which is a self-reported outcomes measure of pain. And the low intensity group didn't have more pain. The high intensity group had more pain at the time, and 25% of the high intensity group didn't finish the study because it hurt too bad to work out that hard. So like of all the things that I showed you in the study, BFR was almost neck and neck with the high intensity group, and they felt better and didn't lose subjects in the study. So like if you're saying you're gonna have equivalent results in leg press, knee extension machine, pain, functional, size growth in a population of 50 to 65-year-old women with knee OA, which again is a lot of clients in the fitness industry trying to make sure they don't have a knee replacement or to help heal themselves if they're trying to go hike and go enjoy themselves and enjoy their family. BFR is a really good opportunity for them. So, all right, that is, I've got plenty of studies and other things, but we'll just wrap it up just to say lots of studies across lots of populations coupled with light, moderate exercises with BFR can be as effective as traditional exercise alone. So that's where BFR has a really nice window of opportunity to kind of insert itself in a population that maybe isn't great at working heavy load or high exertion. Can they get mechanical tension and can they get an exercise stimulus with utilizing BFR and basically have a very similar outcome and similar results to the higher intensity, higher load groups. And because of the light loads, you can use it with those populations a little bit more readily. Okay, I think that is the biggest thing that we need to talk about. And then we can talk about the Be Strong band specifically. Okay, any questions before we jump into the Be Strong bands? I mean, I said a lot, I could say a lot more, try to make sure. I think I did an okay job on time. All right, what do we got? What questions we got? Promo questions?
No, you answered them all.
Okay. Let me.
Got any questions? Nate just started.
Oh, no, I definitely feel the difference when I do the blood flow on that new step, man.
Oh, yeah.
That
I'm really tired, that sucks.
That is my favorite thing though that he just said, because the new step machine is like one of the smoothest machines that I use in the clinic regularly. It's just it is just a machine that it's like a little mini leg press, right? It's small range. You're not cycling. Sometimes I like a bike. I'm not knocking a bike. I'm just saying it's really smooth to do the new step. And it's like having your blood flow restricted on your limb and you're just doing these little mini leg presses all the time. And you get immediate fatigue in that. Like it's hard.
A minute into it, I'm like, dude, this sucks. And so the next 13 minutes, I'm like, okay, God, I can do this. Yeah. I know, I've done it before, and I've done it before we done the blood flow, and I was doing, I think like I was up to 1,200 or something.
Okay.
14 minutes.
Yeah.
But then once I put the blood flow restrictor on it, I'm like around 1,000. I pumped it up to 9. I was doing 8, and so I'm like, okay, I know I can physically finish this, but it sucks going through it because I'm like huffing and puffing, and like that first minute, it's like before without it, it's like I could go like maybe 4 or 5 minutes into it and not really feel it until that part. But yeah, with that blood flow on there, like it sucks. Like as soon as you, I don't know if it's like it feels like that new step has a brain on it. That okay, you've done a couple of these, let's crank it down. It's like it feels different. It's a minute into it, it just sucks.
Yeah, no, and I hate to say it. So like sometimes people think like, oh, this is the this is the magic here. And it's like, you're gonna have to work. I never said it was easy. You know, I never said it was easy. I said that you could do lighter things because your body's gonna experience more mechanical tension. So like you have the same resistance, the same machine, the same tempo, everything, but you can't quite move it as effectively because it's harder because your muscles are saying, all right, I don't have the oxygen available to recruit those muscles. Let me try harder. Well, what happens when you try harder, right? Like more muscle growth, right? And so like it's just this natural thing when you do lighter things that your body can respond to that stimulus very effectively. And so it's just, I love the BFR on new steps and things like that, generally speaking, but one of my favorites is like as a finisher, right? So like you've already done a good workout and then it's just like, just churn it out at the end. I have literal professional athletes that I'll end on something like that and they're looking at me like, I'm getting on the machine that old lady was just on? And I'm like, yes, but you're gonna do it at 120 steps per minute and we'll do that for a 20-second churn and then you're gonna cruise out. And we're just gonna do that for 4 minutes, no big deal. And they're just like, by 4 minutes. And this is a paid athlete, like they're being paid to play a sport. And that's tough. And I'm just saying like, it's hard, but it's not hard on their joints, right? And so again, I'm rehabbing them. And so they're trying to stay healthy and fit and active and not lose their conditioning and their training and get stronger, whatever the intent that I'm trying to use BFR with. And you guys can do it that way too. I just scratched the surface of the studies. I mean, there are tendon studies out there about explosive jump training. There is performance metrics on something called post-activation potentiation, which includes like how long can you perform better with BFR, meaning like, so did you tap into something before you went to jump that made you jump higher? Like what was your warm up that you now have a higher vertical? And BFR's been in that space now. And it's like, whoa, how did that happen? Now it's a 15, 20 minute lag because you're just tapping into something in your body, but BFR allowed you to recruit that to find it so you could go perform. So, and then there's endurance athletes. There are VO2 max studies out here that you can increase your VO2 max with this on cyclists and rowers. And again, I just giving you a handful of studies, but like just the general fitness population was what I was trying to bring forward here, but it's pretty neat. All right, so let's talk about these chambers in the Be Strong BFR band specifically. So this is a flat product here right now. So it's the chambers, there are multiple chambers in here that are flat. When you go to close this space off and you insert the pump and you go to inflate this, the chambers all come together and that's what's going to come in and restrict your limb circumferentially. So they all inflate equally when I pump this into a circle here. Go ahead and like squeeze, like just kind of squeeze the chambers there, right? I'll let you do that too. So just the concept of saying the chamber squeeze is the elasticity of this product. So every time you squeeze a muscle, that squeezes into that and it allows that blood flow to pass. This is not like a blood pressure cuff or a surgical tourniquet that is inelastic. This is an elastic-based product, which is why it has a give to it. So it will restrict, but as you're moving, it will give along with it. So it's not a full give. It doesn't give all of your circulation back, but it will restrict in a circumferential manner. And then when you push those chambers in with any pump, then you're gonna get like a safe return of blood flow, more or less. When you go to put these in and out, like you'll just depress this to take this in or out, and it's the same thing. So if this were not depressed down, it's not gonna fit in. Okay, so you're gonna break the nozzle unless you depress that first, and then it clips in, locks in. We will talk about the different restrictive pressures in the bands. The different colors are gonna give you different restrictive pressures on this. So this is just, long story short, this is a proprietary product that they measured the size, both the length and the width of this, and partnered it with the pump to be able to tell you how much air you should be putting into and out of this product specifically because of the size and the dimensions. And there's a lot of good studies out there that talked about the circumference of your limb matters more than the restrictive pressure specifically. I mean, not directly that way, but the idea is your thigh is going to use a bigger band, not just longer, but also thicker, wider, to help you restrict the blood flow adequately into your lower limbs, where your upper limbs are gonna have a more narrow product. The first thing that we'll do here is when we do a little bit of a breakout here is I'll have everybody just kind of put one on their one arm and then just inflate it to the recommended pressures. And for red, it's 250, for green, it's 200. And then what we'll do is we'll do like a pulse check, and we'll just kind of feel out how to move them around here. Ryan, your pump here's
I got more pumps, don't worry.
okay.
The pumps don't die as fast as the bands.
You gotta go to a meeting.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Okay. Good. All right. Hope you learned something.
Yeah.